Evet şimdi
Warte mal, Jungs, ey, Jungs, ganz kurz. Ey, wir haben ein Minimum geschickt. Wollt ihr machen? Aber daran wollt ihr
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
Greetings from Tbilisi. This is Burn Power, coming to you on a nice, overcast, drippy day. These are my favorites. I don't care what anyone else says. Summer is too hot. Winter, it never gets cold enough here. But I really love the drippy, cooler days when the weather starts to slide back down to normal. It's still like 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 whatever Celsius. So it's not actually cold, but you can feel the chill everywhere, the leaves falling, and I love that. So today we have someone I found on the internet watching his videos. I'll describe a bit of that in the video. And it's a man named Doug Lansky who works in the tourist industry. And he goes around giving messages to the people at different destinations, telling them, hey, you need to wake up and smell the coffee here, or smell the pomegranates, or smell the wine, or smell the garlic, or whatever else you're going to smell, because the world is changing. There are way too many people in certain spots, and others don't have many at all. And we need to rethink our relationship to the world we travel into. So I decided to get in touch with him. I've been thinking about this whole tourism and reality series, which will probably come out in 2025. But you'll notice I've done a few videos on the subject already, which will end up being addenda to the main series when they come out. And this will be one of them. So we had a very good conversation. Let's go ahead and talk with Doug Lansky, who is an American, but he's been living in Stockholm, Sweden for several years. Without any further ado,
то Лондон, то Стокгольм. Вот нас цивилизация жандармы, он оттуда сюда бежал. Здесь нас сюда и вот так, туда-сюда перемещался с 1903 до 1917 года, 3 апреля приехал в Лондон. И вот, и одновременно командовал Советным революционным фронтом, и ура!
I have with me today a person I found on the YouTube while doing research on tourism for my upcoming tourism and reality video, Doug Lansky. And Doug, where are you from originally? You're living in Sweden now, yes?
Born in Manhattan in the Village. My parents were kind of hippies that got gentrified, and then moved to Minnesota when I was like 2, right. And grew up mostly Minnesota and Colorado, and then took off.
I missed you in Manhattan. I lived there from 1980 to 1996. So I think you weren't there at that point.
No.
So Doug works for, we'll say, in the tourist industry. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, you do a lot of speaking about issues related to tourism, and he has a website, which I'll link below. And I found him through these rather, should we say, piquant little videos he made, kind of performing a service of kind of ironically telling you what tourism people and airline attendants and such wish they could tell you, but because of the rules of politeness don't. So Doug has told you for him. And we're going to play a short one right now. This is a very recent video he did called What Destinations Wish They Could Tell You. It's about 2.5 minutes long. And then we'll come back and talk about some of the issues in the tourist industry, and we'll go from there.
All right. Testing, testing. Attention all tourists. We are so happy you decided to come and visit us, but it looks like too many of you showed up at once. We did cut down on our marketing during peak season, but I guess not enough of you noticed that. So now we're in a bit of a predicament, and to make a long story short, we need some of you to, how to put this delicately, leave. We want to be as fair as possible, so we will start with the visitors who contribute almost nothing to our economy, and that's you cruise ship visitors. You arrive by the thousands, go to all the most popular spots during peak visiting hours, then get bulk discounts on entry fees. You scare away our higher spending visitors with your crowds, and then the cruise line takes kickbacks and ridiculously huge commissions on all the local tours. The ships pollute the air we breathe while paying no local taxes. And because you have unlimited food and drinks on board the ship, it's not surprising that our data shows that most of you just get a fridge magnet, a cup of coffee, then take a shit and get back on the boat. Thanks, but no thanks. You can fuck right off and bon voyage. Next on the list we are asking to leave are the bachelor partiers. You spend enough on drinks, but you also make too much noise at night, throw your trash everywhere, and treat our old cobblestone streets like your own private urinals. Please pack up and order an Uber. Time to go home. And of course you day visitors will need to leave as well. According to our data, most of you are total fucking cheapskates. You bring your own water, a sandwich, and then walk around and take up space. Bye. The next group we're asking to leave are the budget airline visitors who are staying at cheap Airbnbs, especially the Airbnbs owned by foreigners. You don't spend much, and almost none of that Airbnb money ends up in our local economy. Please pack up, and don't let the subway turnstile hit you in the ass on the way out. And last on our list, and many of you may find this surprising, are those of you who are staying at large chain hotels, Hilton, Marriott, Accor, and all their micro brands. About a quarter of your money goes to Booking.com or the OTA you booked on, 15 to 20% goes to the chain's international headquarters, and all the profit goes to some giant multinational company who's rich enough to own the $200 million hotel property. Unlike the others, you are free to stick around for a day or so before leaving, but please tip generously. The rest of you may stay. Thank you for your cooperation, and we look forward to seeing the rest of you in the off-season.
That rest of you is not a lot these days, it seems. I have to confess, I'm going to Florence for 2 weeks in January, and I'm doing that on purpose because I really want to see the Renaissance architecture and paintings, and I don't want to try to squeeze it into 3 days or at worst an afternoon the way some people try to do. But I am staying in some sort of Airbnb that's a 45-minute walk or so from downtown. But as a friend of mine from Florence said, you're spending 2 weeks here, which is, I think, gives me a little leeway. So, but
actually the bigger thing there is if you're staying in an Airbnb that's owned by a local or not.
Exactly.
Or even an Italian or not. So, I mean, that's the thing. So, let's say 20% goes to San Francisco Airbnb headquarters and 80% stays in the local economy, plus maybe some local taxes if they manage to collect them, which they're not usually very good about. But if it's owned by a foreigner, if it's owned by a German or if it's owned by a Canadian, that place you're staying at, then like zero money goes into the local economy from an accommodation perspective. And accommodation is the single biggest chunk when you're there. So there's that.
Yeah, which is also goes with the chain hotels you talked about as well. And,
right. A lot of people don't think that.
And the cruise ships, who basically are floating hotels. They want you to do everything on board. And we'll talk about that a bit later, because I lived in Alaska and got to watch and work with the cruise ships intimately. So I have some questions and observations.
Sure, far away.
When did you get interested in tourism? How did you move into that industry?
Yeah, so my background is kind of doing humor writing and stuff. I wrote in high school. I was an editor, and I read a weekly column in college. I started a Lampoon in college. I was always kind of doing that critical, and I had a column called Campus Interruptus for 4 years at a small liberal arts school in Colorado. And then when I went traveling, I was kind of writing these like 25-page epic letters home every once in a while when I could find a computer. And I got back. And I actually got a gig with the New Yorker right before I left, which was unexpected. I was kind of wearing ripped jeans, long hair, T-shirt, walked in because I'd been an intern there. And my boss is like, hey, let me walk you into human resources, see if we can get you a job. I'm like, I'm not really prepared for this. I didn't come thinking I was going to have an interview. They're like, nah, don't worry about it. It's casual. And they offered me a job as a staff writer at the New Yorker. I was like, Jesus, this is a dream gig. And so I said, look, I'm sure you can manage without me. I'm just going to go for a couple of months and I'll be back. And then I didn't come back for 2.5 years. And the person I never signed a contract. The person who kind of offered me this gig was long gone. And I don't know that I really wanted to do it then. I wanted to be a travel writer. I'd gotten hit by a car in Bangkok while I was in Bangkok. I'd been about 2.5 years on the road at that point, and worked my way around the world. I'd been picking mangoes in Israel. I was a DJ at Club Med in Bali, and I was a snowmobile guide in the Alps and traveled backpack super cheap in between. But when I was taking like a massage course in Thailand, got hit by a car, broke my ankle, went home. And when I was in the hospital, right before I left Bangkok, I had bought a fake ID pass that said travel writer. And I was in the hospital for a long time, and I was looking at this thing going, that'd actually be a pretty cool gig. Right. And my dad, I remember he asked me, he's like, so what do you want to do? You just, wasted 2.5 years traveling around the world. I'm like, I think I want to be a travel writer. My dad's like, wrong answer.
Right.
Go get a real job. And I was pretty dead set on doing this. And I kind of went about it pretty strategically and ended up, I made some mistakes. I wrote to Rolling Stone. I'm like, hey, I would like to be your young traveling reporter. Whatever, fuck off. Pardon my French. And then, I actually turned towards newspapers, and I got a gig as a syndicated columnist. I was like the youngest syndicated columnist in the country. I had a column, by the age of 25, and didn't pay a lot. And it kind of grows with the number of newspapers as your column grows. And went off, started doing that. And 5 years on the road, signed a 5-year contract. And then had a kid come. So I was probably like 7.5 years on the road before I stopped. Full speed, full all the time. And picked up some insights along the way, as it turns out.
Well, were you doing what we might call independent traveling at that time? Just very
funny you say
behind
that.
the back door, but not quite Rick Steves style, but even more.
Kind of. I don't hate Rick Steves. He's a nice guy. I hate what he did.
I understand.
This whole so let me just back up 1 second. So like Life magazine in the 50s did this thing in like Arizona, said like the world's loneliest road, and put it on the cover. What does that do? It attracts all these people to go there. It's no longer the loneliest road. You call something through the back door, like you're the only secret ones there. And then it creates a freaking superhighway through the back door. And then it kills the very thing that you're promoting. Right. So that whole the back door thing is like freaking BS. And it's selling something that doesn't belong to him. And I can't stand it. And he became a gazillionaire off of selling something, the quaintness of something, which he ruined in the process of selling it. So Rick Steves can go and F himself with that whole thing. I think it's pretty evil.
Is he responsible for what happened to the Cinque Terre?
No, not single-handedly, but and let me just say this, not just Rick Steves, but a whole lot of people can go F themselves for doing that stuff. They sold out places in a way. They sold out that which didn't belong to them. I mean, the whole classic line is, a place is a paradise right up until it, gets sold as paradise right up until it goes to hell. And that's like a Thoreau quote that I butchered. Just now. But the thing is that, when you say independent, when I was reading travel writing at the time, it just felt like a lot of poof pieces, a bunch of just like someone almost rewrote the press release. And that's what the destinations and hotels want. And when you're a travel writer, and I kind of come a little bit from the old school of travel writing, where you actually applied some journalistic practices, as opposed to today with a lot of these influencers where they just pose in a bikini in front of famous, nice places and go, look how amazing this is. And here's me in a bikini. And then they get a gazillion followers on Instagram because of that. And it goes bananas that way. And they have this like cachet in the industry from having a lot of followers as opposed to having quality content.
Well, even the Eiffel Tower, they've had to put guard gates because of all of, so you can't just walk up to it anymore. There's like a plexiglass or something sort of gate in front of it, because so many people were taking selfies at this one spot that they had to stop them from coming in.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I was just there for the Olympics for a couple days, and I mean, it was beautifully done with Paris and all the thing managed. I hadn't been there for a little while, but I mean, I think that's. So let's just go back a second. When we say independent, so when I read all these poof pieces, I told myself when I'm laying in that hospital bed, if I ever make it as a travel writer, I am not taking any money to do these press trips,
right.
Because they give you like between, let's say, $3,000 and $30,000 worth of free stuff, depending on the thing that they're offering. Who can write an objective piece? I mean, I get it if you're a book reviewer, you get a free book review to review. And if you're a movie reviewer, you can go see the movie for free. But that's, that's between $10 and $30. When you're starting to give someone tens of thousands of dollars for a trip, and also with the acknowledgement that you're going to get blacklisted if you write something remotely negative.
Right.
What kind of journalism is that?
Right.
You're fooling the readers. I mean, you don't put these giant like disclaimers that say, hey, $50,000 was accepted in writing this article. And you get a lot of these travel editors at the time who I loved, a lot of them. And they were running my pieces, and they were lovely, lovely people. But, they wanted to become travel writer or travel editor for a reason. And so because they're editor, they're like, okay, I can take this media trip and be unbiased about it because I'm the editor. And then they go out there and they're trying to show their boss why they were in Peru for 2 weeks. So they splash their story over the first 3 pages of the travel section and make it look really cool and nice. And they're getting a following in the local media.
Well, that whole thing reminds me of movie reviewers who accept junket passes to go to the actual production. And so they're given all this stuff at that point, and those people are again in the position where they can't diss the movie. They can't give you an honest review. And
so I mean, again, these travel editors, a lot of them who are sort of they weren't put to pasture somewhere, but some really actively wanted it because they love travel, and here's this great thing, and they can also work with the layout person and make their pieces shine. And they were buying my content for like $50 or $20. And they guess I'm just use it to fill space on the side. And here I thought doing more interesting pieces, in my humble opinion. I'd go to like sumo wrestling school in Japan for a week and write about what that was like. Right. And they're doing like a fly and flop story, or, there's these classic themes. There's like, retracing a famous person's or your parents' footsteps when they went somewhere, called a footstepper piece. Right. There's the whole rediscovering yourself every freaking week when you go on a trip. Like, I rediscovered myself here and there, and it's like a bunch of new agey hocus pocus baloney that, I mean, it's the same.
Eat, pray, love.
Rediscovered themselves 10 times this year.
Right. Eat, pray, love, goodbye, Bali.
Yeah, I mean, if you can have one epic trip like that, but they're doing it every month. They were rediscovering their this and the inner beauty, and then you can never say anything remotely critical. And Nancy Newhouse, who was the travel editor of the New York Times, established this kind of industry rule, which is, why would we use our precious space in our newspaper to say something that is critical when we could be using it to say something that is nice and helpful to readers? So we got rid of all the critical stuff, and that whole section became a giant poof piece after that, industry-wide. Right. And I just felt it was just poofy. It wasn't real. It didn't have a connection in my mind to what travel was like. And I was fairly alone in this opinion. And the whole industry was like taking media trips, writing poof pieces, splashing it across everywhere. And I'm kind of going, hello, like, and trying to keep my neutrality. And I was poor because of that, because you don't make a lot of money. I mean, the first couple of years I was making 11 grand a month. And then I was doing stuff for National Public Radio, which would pay me like $50 or $200 a pop once in a while. I mean, it was like I was borrowing money from my parents to be a nationally syndicated columnist and NPR contributor. Right. And TV show host when I was doing like this Travel Channel, Discovery Channel thing for a one-off, which turned out wasn't quite my thing. You have a camera in your face from the second you wake up till you go to bed. It feels like the first couple of days it's fun, but then it's like a dinner party where the guests never go home. Yeah. Well,
where I lived in Alaska, they did a couple of different reality shows there, and I quickly saw is anything but reality. So much of this is staged. And people would come there on cruise ships and say, "Oh, is so and so? Do you know them?" And I go, "Yeah, I know them," but it's like it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, it is straight. I mean, like, here's the thing. So I'm on this video shoot. It's my first time. We're in Japan. Because they asked me where I wanted to go, and I said, "Are you guys paying?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Then let's go to Japan." And so we're in a market, and the director says, "Okay, I want you to kind of go to this stall, look at something there, then walk over here, look at something, and then walk right past the camera and don't look at it." I'm like, God, this whole thing feels so phony, and it costs us so much money. He said, "I'll tell you what. If we had a bigger budget, I could make you look cheaper and more independent. I mean, you could basically put a bunch of cameras everywhere and then just let me roam and be myself, and then I could just buy whatever. But they'd have to have 5 cameras come and set up 2 hours in advance, and the crew would be tripled, and the budget would be tripled. So there's truth to that. The cheaper you're trying to do this, the more staged the whole thing feels. But we were able to fix a lot of that in the editing room and make it kind of cool afterward. So
nowadays, I noticed that a lot of these extreme travel vloggers are out going around the world, but they all have for instance, their drones, and they're showing it everything from above. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, they never see that while they're traveling. That is to say, that's not their vision. It's like God's eye view, but it's not what they see. It's not what I'm going to see if I'm there, and it's a very strange, it paints the thing in this more epic gloss than what they're doing. And often what they're doing is they're just moving through the land. They're moving through cultures. They're no more connected to what's going on the ground than, a person sitting at home watching them. Slightly more, but,
so I guess, just to kind of keep the red thread going, which is that because I never took money, I had a pretty objective view going the whole time. And that worked to my advantage coming out of it, because then I was basically a straight shooter, and I didn't try to paint stuff in this glossy way. I was looking at it for what it was, and I could see the trends happening. I could see who was doing things in a better way and being critical. And that helped me start speaking to destinations and travel companies. And so they want a straight shooter. They want to know what the trends are. They don't want someone that just puts the rose-colored glasses over everything and every chart goes up all over the place. They want the truth so they can make smart business decisions. And so, that really helped me going forward and launching into this next phase of my career, which was being a kind of an advisor to destinations, everyone from Saudi to Iceland, and in different levels of time with each one. It could be a couple days here, it could be half a year here. And then also speaking to tourism companies from booking.com to Amex to Expedia and everyone in between.
I was just thinking this the other day, and see how this sits with you. There was like a peak period for travel before things kind of tipped over in a different direction, around 99, 2000. And what I mean by that is Russia was more open than it had been for a while, and it was beginning to solve its problems. China was open, and they hadn't unleashed their hordes upon the world yet. You could travel to probably more countries at that time than at any other time. And then September 11th came, and suddenly things started to get strange again. And then by the time we get to where we are now, there's all sorts of strange tensions around the world that are making travel more difficult for the person who, wants to see certain kinds of lands and such like that. But feel free to disagree.
I'm going to kind of disagree with you there. In this respect, you can still do, like, you're going to Italy and you're going to Venice. You can still go see what you want to see and do it in the off season. If you want to go back to when there weren't many tourists around, in 1950, there were 25 million international tourists. That made it easy to be alone in places and have more unique experiences. I remember when I was in Syria I was there with my then soon-to-be wife, from Sweden, and what was that year? That was like in 1993, maybe. And Clinton had just reciprocated like an attack on the region because of a perceived threat to his predecessor, George W. Bush. And so there was some tension there. But I remember being in Aleppo the not Damascus, the northern city of the two in major cities in Syria, and there was like 5 of us travelers there in the city, because you all go to the same spot. There's like this one hotel lobby where you can hang out, and we're all there. And you didn't mention Israel if you were heading there. You called it Disneyland. That was the code word. And yeah, there's something special when you're there. And I remember being at a restaurant with my girlfriend then, and people were ordering beers, because you could get some beers in certain places, ordering beers and things to our table. My taxi driver that we went around to a few attractions with, he took us home to his family and made us dinner, because it was so crazy unique to be a tourist there at the time. We're trying to be so welcoming and warm. I'm guessing if I was there today, well, maybe it's a little nutty now, but I mean, I'm just saying, when there aren't many tourists around, people can be very warm and receptive to you. Whereas when there's mass tourism, you're just a walking bag of money. So there's that differentiation. That's the tipping point. And that happens in different destinations all the time. And to that point, you can be like in Bangkok at the, in the middle of the city in a very touristy place. You can step 10 yards in one direction, jump on a local bus, and you are nose to armpit with the local population, and you will not see another traveler. And you're just crammed into some local bus having a very local experience. And you can go to a restaurant where there's only locals, and you can go to a restaurant where it's only tourists. So it's a lot of what you're after and what you're willing to do to get it. And you can get that today as easily as you can get it 50 years ago if you just dare to step off the tourist trail.
Well, I go to Prague regularly. I study the history of European puppetry, and it's a great place to go. But I notice that, for instance, they're all on the Royal Way that goes between the Old Town Square and the castle. And the tourists don't know how to even get off of that. Meanwhile, I'm in an abandoned castle on that road upstairs watching a version of the Faust play that is a recreation of what was done 150 years ago. And I'm looking down on them and I'm just saying, these poor people, they don't know, I'm right next to them, but I'm living in Prague. I'm in Prague, actually.
Yeah. I remember the first time in Prague, it was in 93, got off the train station, and a little old lady came up and said, like, you need some place to live? I have an apartment. Here's a picture. And this is pre-Airbnb. And I was like, sure, why not? And it was right on the Old Town Square. It was about 100, and it was like a 3-bedroom apartment. It was like 120 square meters with a balcony over the Old Town Square. I think I paid $12 a night. It was same thing, probably going for like $300 a night now, but it was crazy. And these kind of how things got started back in the day. And the thing is that if you go to certain places today, you can still find that, if that's what's important to you. If what's more important is that you see famous things and go where all the tourists go and get the cheapest airfare, you will not find that.
Yeah. Well, I live in Tbilisi, Georgia, which is not on everyone's major bucket list. It's a great place to live. They have tourism here, but they're kind of clunky about it, which is actually a saving grace, because they haven't gotten to the point where it's predatory, that where you got for instance, all of the cash and change machines here are honest. It's really weird. Whereas if you go to Prague, you have to pray that, you're not going to be taken for all that you've got, But so I've got a channel, Georgian Crossroads, and I started to do it to write about the real Georgia and not just this one road a lot of people stay on. And then after a while, I started thinking, I shouldn't even tell them too much. I should tell them about life here, but I shouldn't, I'll tell them about hikes that I do that would take someone reading that and going like, yeah, I'm in the mood to do that. But I'm not giving them the easy stuff, that would bring people, just drag people here.
But I think I should go back a second. This is your podcast. You decide where you want to take this. But I think it's worth sort of commenting on, like, what's the point of tourism?
Yeah.
Why are we traveling? And
that is
a lot of people who travel, it's kind of like this. If someone's like, oh my God, you have to be a parent, or oh my God, you should run a marathon, or you should do an Ironman. I mean, it's not for everybody. And a lot of people get talked into it. And so they kind of just take a very easy, or they want to go the glam route. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's very different from the, going to Georgia and wandering in the outskirts of where you are and looking for new experiences. It's a very, it's one's more rough and tumble, and the other one is like, glamorous, and you go from 5-star boutique hotels and you can get chauffeur driven to the next thing. So, I mean, what are we doing? And if you look back in the old days, we were hunter-gatherers 200,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, even less. And so it's not, so that's what we're hardwired to do, is hunt and gather. Right. And it's not surprising that the thing that comes most natural to us as tourists is eating and shopping. That's the modern hunting gathering. That's what we do while we're out there. And we don't have anything inside us that's hardwired to be a tourist or a travel writer, or a tourist or a traveler. I mean, what we were really doing is there were people in our tribe back then who would want to wander off and explore and find new fertile grounds to hunt and gather. Right. But we only needed one of those people. You only needed one Christopher Columbus in this city of many to dare to go out there and explore. Now it's like everyone's supposed to be doing this. And there's, no one wants, the Indiana Jones thing is fun to watch in the movie theater. You don't want to live that stuff and get shot at and have your life actually be in danger. So what we've kind of fallen in love with and what we actually do are very different things when we paint these pictures. And travel has very much changed into this democratization of low cost. Yeah,
I'm old enough to have traveled in 1978, 79. And I went to France and Switzerland at that point. Radically different from anything people know now. I called home twice in a year.
Yeah.
And I had to go to the French post office. Wait, the nice thing about that is they didn't even charge me for it, even though it was on their on my dime, but they didn't charge me. I think whatever. But the thing was that there weren't that many services for people. The Swiss, little French Swiss town I was in, village I was in, was still, had farmers in it. Now, if you go to the same place, it looks pretty similar, but there are almost no farmers left, dairy people. It's all people with their second homes from Lausanne and Geneva area. So it's, and now you see tourists just come there. There's this one ski town right near there called Villars, which is all for skiing and such. That was doing its thing back then, but you can tell the structure is so much more intense. Of course, the Swiss do that. They are basically responsible for so much of our model of tourism in the good way, I would say. They kind of invented the concept of the modern hotelier, the person who takes care of you, out of the Romantic movement, because they started getting these English tourists who wanted to experience the mountains in a new way. But now I think when I go to Europe now, everything, I was in Prague in 2000. And when I compare, and I was there around Christmas time, which is when they have the Christmas markets and such, it was pleasant. Now, if I go there around Christmas time, the one thing I am sure to do is stay away from the Christmas markets, because it's just, you're just trying to sardine your way through there. And it's a very crazy thing. And something has happened. What would you say has happened, actually, that has created the problems? Obviously, there's been some sort of strange uptick after the pandemic, but all these things were going on before. Yeah. How do you analyze?
No, I mean, it's just every place has a carrying capacity. If you had 10 people in your 10 visitors were there in that Christmas market, it'd be fine. If you put 100,000 visitors in the Christmas market internationally, it's not fine. There's a carrying capacity for everything, and there's not like a magic number. It's, like when you go to any room, it's like the fire code violation. Fire department has deemed, 26 people can be in this room. If you put 27 there, it'd be fine. It's not like, same thing with these Christmas markets. You can't say, there can be 50 visitors there, but not 51. Right. And that's what keeps people from making any kind of sort of carrying capacity regulations, is they can't agree on the number. But I mean, it's always easy to add more. It's hard to go down. So, I mean, I think and they refuse to do it. And no one's had to do it before, because tourism was naturally selective. There weren't many people showing up, but suddenly they got to start putting in some guardrails, and they haven't done it. No one wants to be this bad guy and stand on the outskirts of town and say, sorry, you can't come in. They'd have to implement ticketing, and that kills a lot of the vibe. So there's once you start protecting a place, kind of kills the vibe as well. There's a place in Utah called The Wave. It's this beautiful, like, it looks like a wedding cake of petrified sand dunes. And I think they only allow like 25 people a day in there, and they have a raffle at the ranger's office every morning. Right. And yeah, it'd be nice if anyone who wanted to go there could just walk there, but that kills it because too many people were showing up. So they had to put in these draconian measures of having this lottery every morning. But better that, I think, of the two evils, than to have 500 people show up at once and kill it, and no one gets a nice experience. Right. And I think that's what we're up against. And no one has the mandate, because what happened with tourism was, it started with, I think, a little roadside tourist office in Ohio was the first in the U.S. There was one in Grenoble, France, was the world's first tourism office. But in Ohio, I think, had the first roadside tourist office. And essentially what it is it's like people needed a place to put their brochures. So first they kind of put them on a brochure rack. Who pays for the brochure rack? Well, we need like an association of attractions or hotels. Then we got to put something to keep them from blowing away and then protect it from the sun. Then we'll just put the whole thing indoors and create a visitor center. And then we'll add a toilet. And now more people go for the toilet than anything else. So, I mean, it's just kind of evolved over time. And then in that evolution, you don't need bricks and mortar anymore because people have more stuff on their phone than you can get in any tourist office. And you can book it through your phone as well. So there's no real point to it. People will walk in because they're used to it, or it's got air conditioning, or it's heated, or it's got a toilet. But you can get all that through your phone. And when you put them in the visitor center, you're pulling them out of the consumer loop. So they're not spending as much. So it's kind of, you should look at it like a pit stop for a racing car to change tires. If it takes 5 seconds to change tires, those tires better be so fast that they make up for those 5 seconds. If you pull people into the tourist office for 30 minutes, you better be upselling them to such a level or giving them in such an incredible experience that to make up for taking them outside the consumer loop for 30 minutes where they could have been, paying at a cafe, eating and drinking and doing it on their phone at the same time. So that's died in many ways. There's no real reason to keep any tourist office open.
Right.
I can tell.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think they killed the one that was here since I've been here. The pandemic.
You can also do a temporary one in peaks, put it on a bicycle with a little umbrella, like a little gelato bicycle, and send out some brochures in the main part of town. You don't need to have a staffed place. That's kind of overkill. And you can also have an app where you can have an offsite call center for help.
You make a point in some of your videos about the fact that the travel industry just grew up unregulated, and then eventually the larger governmental structures began to look at it and say, oh, we need to do something with this. But in a sense, the horse was out of the barn already. And you make a connection between auto traffic and stoplights and tourism, how there are no stoplights for tourism.
Well, I made kind of a different comparison there, but I think, let me go back to your first point first. When you're talking about the Grand Tour earlier in Europe, where the rich of primarily the aristocrats were going on these tours around Europe. Tourism existed long before the DMO, which is the Destination Marketing Organization, which now are starting to be called Destination Management Organizations, although they're not really doing much management. But so the DMO was, what their role was they would kind of get all these stakeholders together, collect some money from them or get some government money, and then they would put out an ad a full-page ad in the New York Times, which cost a lot of money, but none of the stakeholders could really afford to do that on their own. So they kind of consolidated the marketing efforts. Nowadays, that's all changed, and all these stakeholders, Disney has a bigger reach than Visit Florida does. So, it's all changed with this stuff. But what happened essentially was these DMOs got out in front of tourism, which was already in existence, and kind of pretended they were leading the parade of an industry that was already established. So they're just doing the marketing. Now imagine any company that started, if there was an industry that already existed and then you just did the marketing. Well, you're missing out on quality control, on management stuff, on the production stuff. Everything else in a company that's more important or as important as the marketing. So that's the only control mechanism they have. So when they're like, oh my God, a place is getting overcrowded and we just do the marketing, their only control mechanism is to do less marketing. Oh, in the peak periods, we'll just do a little less marketing, and then we'll do more marketing in the shoulder and off season. So it's like driving a bus just using the gas pedal and not using the brake or other controls. And you need to use the brake sometimes. And that's what's happened with the industry. They don't have the mandate or the skill set to really be doing management. And now that places have gotten so crowded with the whole world traveling and all the budget airlines and all the costs going down. I mean, if you go back 80 years, it cost, if you calculate and adjust for inflation, it was like $12,000 a round trip ticket, New York, London in economy class, $12,000. And so it's gotten a lot cheaper to travel. More people are doing it. And now we need to actually put in some guardrails to keep too many people from showing up at once. Disney does it. Hotels do it. Airlines do it. Golf courses do it. Everyone within the tourism industry does not allow infinite numbers of people to just show up. Even at Taylor Swift concerts, they put in, you have to have a ticket. But for some reason, for destinations, we've just gone, and it's overcrowded. So surprise.
The barrier they put up in Venice, maybe you can explain this a little. Yeah. Seems like too little. It's not really stopping anyone.
No, it didn't. It was a failure. And so was the one they just started last week. They announced a $20, 20 euro fee for cruise ship visitors going to Santorini and Mykonos starting next summer. $20 for most cruise ships is the cost of internet for one device. It's less than half the cost of the cheapest speeding ticket in the US, which does not stop people from speeding. So, I mean, why would you actually pay $1,000 to go to Greece and then, fly over from the States and then another maybe 500 to 1,000 to be on this cruise ship and then paying for cocktails for $15-20 and internet connections for $20? And then they go, oh, Santorini with this beautiful donkey ride up and the most incredible sunsets. Can't see that. It's going to be 20 euros. Who's going to stop and go, oh, sorry, after shelling out a couple thousand, they're not going to do 20. It doesn't make sense. Right. Maybe if it was $300 to $1,000, they wouldn't go.
Right.
But for whatever reason, they didn't do that. So that doesn't seem like it's going to work. Nor did $5 stop anybody from entering Venice, which is less than the cost of a cappuccino.
Well, one thing I've noticed over the years is how much the internet has come to facilitate everything, making things. I mean, I traveled in 2005 on one of my research trips in Europe. That was much harder than when I went in 2012. And the ease of travel, the ease of booking, the ease of flying, of getting tickets, although there's a lot of strange effects that go with the ease of these things.
I think it can be the solution, though, to a lot of this overcrowding. So, for example, I'll give you something that doesn't exist, but which could easily exist. So you're going to Prague, and you've never been there before, and let's say Amsterdam, and you've got, because I can list the attractions more easily, and you really want to go to Anne Frank House and the Heineken Brewery and the Van Gogh Museum and the Rijksmuseum, right? Those are the 4 things you really want to go to Amsterdam to do. And you go to put in your dates on Expedia or your favorite OTA, and it pops up a window that says, hey, here are the 10 most popular attractions, and 9 of them are fully booked on those dates. Are you sure you still want to go? Oh, right. That's good information. Right. No, I don't think I do want to go. It's like, I think I'm going to change my dates to a time when I can get into the stuff that I want to go see. It's like, you don't just walk over to the most popular restaurant in town and try to get in. You call them, or you check online if you can get a table before you go there. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And you plan your trip to that nice restaurant accordingly to when you can get a table. So I think we could use that just transparency of supply and demand to let people spread themselves out. And same thing once they're there throughout the day when you have time ticketed entry. So you don't just book a ticket to the Modern Art Museum for that day. You book a ticket at a specific time. And that way people spread themselves out throughout the day. And they do that at all the other attractions. And now people are sort of self-spreading throughout the city. So some of this technology can be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. And I've been actually working on a different possible solution, talking to some tech companies about, if you're providing some other, I'm not going to get too into it, but basically if you're providing some nice seamless services through an app that's integrated, you could also have a means of communicating with them. And so you could send out offers to people in crowded areas, nudging them to go to these places where they can get deals, and that'll help peel them off the street. In the same way that not in the same way, but in a slightly same strategy to in Disney World, when they see crowds forming, they send Mickey Mouse here and they send a marching band over here and they disperse the crowds. We need that kind of an air traffic control tower mechanism to help disperse crowds when they pop up for certain reasons. I mean, obviously, if it's a carnival or if it's a big event in the street, you know, it's fine to have crowds. But for everyday tourism built up crowds, we need better mechanisms, and tech can provide a lot of those solutions.
Maybe you can give your opinion on some of the protests we've been seeing in different places. And what
like
do you
Barcelona?
think? Yeah, Barcelona with their squirt guns. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think it's good.
Yeah.
I think they're protesting against the tourists, and it's not the tourists' fault at all. The tourists, most of them book their tickets in the off season when the DMO was asking them to come through advertising. So they were just doing what these marketers wanted them to do and book the tickets. They had no idea it was going to be overcrowded 6 months before. They weren't thinking, and it's not their job to. The destination's job is to protect how busy it is and tell people they can or can't come. So it's not, but you need some of those protests to get the attention of cruise ships and the politicians and other people. And as long as they're nonviolent, a few little squirt guns, if that's what they need to do to get people's attention, fine. Just keep in mind, it is definitely not the tourist's fault. And that's who they're kind of protesting against. They should, but they're kind of doing that to needle the politicians. Right. And that's just the mechanism that kind of needs to happen. If they were protesting only outside the front door of the politicians, probably wouldn't have the same effect.
Right. In Alaska, about 1999, there was a cruise ship protest that they had, the local people in my town, Haines. We only got about 1 or 2 per week. And actually at that time it was 2 or 3. And they protested the waste dumping that was happening nearby in the fjord. And what happened then was the cruise ships got really bitchy, except for Holland America. The other major ones basically got really stingy sending cruise ships to them, which I wasn't particularly sad about. But we also get some of our people from Skagway, Alaska, which in the winter, they have 600 people. In a given day, they can have 4 cruise ships with over 10,000 people on the streets. Yeah. And we didn't want to be like them. But the cruise ships took their vengeance out up on our town. They were like, if you're going to protest, we're not going to give you as many ships and economy and such like that. And so
you got to call their bluff on it. That's the only way. I actually had a vice president of one of the biggest cruise lines say to me that they look at ports like a beautiful woman who they're trying to get into bed with. And they say like, yeah, we want them to say yes to us and no to the other people. But if they say no, we still respect them, or we almost respect them more. That was the example that this guy gave me. And it's a scam. It's the cruise lines make money for the cruise lines. They do a great job at that. And they don't do a great job of making money for the ports, but they pretend like they're making money for the ports. And there is money coming in. I'm not saying there's not, but they also ask them to dredge these deep water ports for them that cost the taxpayers a fortune. Then they get kickbacks from the various jewelry and watch shops, and they have to pay to be in their shopping guide. And then on the local tours, you know, the locals are supposed to provide a tour that's worth $100, even though they're only getting 40. And then the customers are dissatisfied, and because it's difficult to do that. And the cruise line's taking 50, 60% of a cut on a local excursion. Or they're telling them to stay on the ship and spend their money there, and while the water slide on the ship is less crowded. So it's a win for the cruise ship. It's generally a lose for the destination, but we've been so trained as destinations to just be in love with big numbers of people. We think that they're spending money. They're not. There's not, and they're chasing away the bigger spenders. So wealthy people don't want to go someplace that's inundated with cruise ship visitors. And cruise ship visitors, by the way, and they muck with the data. And by the way, let me just say this. I've got nothing against cruise lines per se or the cruising thing. I wish that they didn't pollute, and they've been caught a lot of times, and I'm sure they don't get caught most of the time. I mean, because it's hard to catch them.
They just go out beyond the limit.
How do you follow a cruise ship with a team of scuba divers to see if they're secretly dumping stuff? I mean, it's really difficult to do. If they catch one, it's hard to imagine. It's just sort of like with cars that are speeding. For every time the cop pulls over a speeder, there's probably 1,000 that they don't catch. I mean, so unfortunately, they've been caught polluting many times and dumping stuff into the sea. That's bad. They don't tend to pay local taxes. They're all registered in like Liberia or Panama or someplace where there's not many regulations. They bring in people from poor countries. They don't have to pay very much. They hold on to their passports probably, and they don't let them or don't pay them until they've served their whole term. There's a lot of stuff that's not great about cruise ships that are happening. And cruise ship, a lot of the data they use, for example, here's a classic one. They'll say, our data shows, and I forget the exact number, it's like 30% will return to one of the places that they visited on their cruise. So if it's a 7-night cruise out of Florida, guess which place they return to? Florida.
Exactly.
Cruise ship people are loyal to the cruising. They don't go back as overnight visitors to any of the places hardly that they've been to. So it's the destinations are kind of being sold a bill of goods, and they think, oh, they're going to get a taste of our destination and then come back and stay a week or two. That doesn't happen. They just go on a different cruise with a different itinerary.
Yeah, and I've been told by the people, both workers off the cruise ships and people who've been on the ships, basically when you're on the ship, everything is like propaganda about the ship. And it's all, for instance, on the Diamond, on the Princess cruises, those Diamond stores are often owned by Princess in Alaska. And
the ones that are on the port. Yeah, so what happens is because they go into such economic ruin building this huge port for the cruise ships, then there's like I think it's a Turkish base. There's a couple of these big that are like owned in part by the cruise lines. Will come in and go, hey, we'll take it over from you and run it, and we'll buy it from you. Right. So this is like essentially the cruise lines now own the ports in many of these towns, and they're not going to restrict anybody. They own the areas that now rent shop space to the local sellers.
Right.
I mean, it's so sick. I mean, they've just got it down so well, finely tuned,
I saw a guy who was like, he was doing this more as an investigation, but he went on a cruise ship trip that landed in Haiti. Now, if you know anything about what's happening in Haiti now, you're going, well, that's not a good place to be. But what it is they owned a little cape. And they just brought the people to these beaches there. They're forbidden to go into Haiti. Right. It's just strange. Which brings me to this
future. That's kind of, I think, where the future of cruising is. I mean, so if you just look at it from a success perspective, if cruising, was growing at like, upper close to 10%, growth up until the pandemic, and then it's going to be growing again in the foreseeable future. But you can only put so many boats in Miami's port or in Barcelona's port. You can't put 100 boats there, 100 ships there. So how do they keep growing at that rate? So either cruising needs to become an expensive upmarket thing, or they got to just tool around at sea and only stop at their own private islands that they can overcrowd at will. Or they got to go smaller ships and go into new little ports that haven't been visited before. That's the only way they can grow. So it's going to have to go one of those directions.
One of the things I noticed is that there's been such an uptick in tourism since the beginning of the century. And one of the things that happened was China opened up to send people out finally. And I think the most recent statistic that I saw was 150 million Chinese tourists per year go out into the world.
Yeah, that cuts both ways. So everyone, like 10 years ago, everyone was talking about being China ready, making sure that you have slippers and noodles and a water cooker in the rooms, and that you had no unlucky numbers on the floors and the room numbers. right. Being China ready. But then what would happen is, like, we saw this in Canada, we saw this in like New Zealand. Someone slights a diplomat, or someone says something critical of a Chinese phone maker. They just go like this, and they turn off all tourism to that country. All these places that got very dependent on Chinese tourism saw it just dry up overnight. Right. And I will say, in addition to that, that represents the industry as a whole. So I don't think that any economy, any nation should really have more than about 10% of their economy be in tourism. Because it's fickle. It's been going up over time, but it's a lot. It looks like an EKG graph It doesn't just go smoothly up because there's a volcano in Iceland and there's a terror attack and there's a pandemic and there's a virus outbreak and there's, whatever.
Well, this
floods
happened.
And fires and you name it, heat waves. And tourism goes like this. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, not even close.
Well, in Haines, Alaska, where I'm from, about a third of the economy per year was in tourism. And then the pandemic came and they were hurting for 2 years and beyond. And
I mean, all these places that have a lot of tourism hurt whenever there's a flood, fire, you name it, that happens, which is why it's not a great industry to put too much of your economy into. I mean, over time it is, over 10, 20 years it is, but year to year, it can be really fickle and it kills those stakeholders that are trying to make ends meet. And so, it would be smart for governments to diversify their portfolio a little bit more. And any more that if you have a portfolio of stocks, you don't want to put 30% of it into Google, even if Google seems like a great stock. I mean, like you're taking your chances. So it's the same kind of thing.
So one of the where I really wanted to get to with this is maybe some advice for people who are either travelers or the destinations. You've given a lot of destination advice, but maybe, there's a kind of glitch that happens in people's reality when they travel, and they'll often go to all of these tourist spots, and then they say, they've seen the place when actually what's happened is they've been herded. And what would you say to how would you recommend a person to travel? If someone came to you and said, Doug, I want to go to, name a place, Paris. I want to go to Prague, or I just want to go to Italy in general or something.
Yeah. Well, for that reason, I tend to give more advice to destinations and companies than I do to individual people. I think with individual people, they should travel the way that they feel most comfortable. I don't think being off the beaten path is for everybody. I don't think staying in a youth hostel is for everybody, or going with a backpack versus going with nice luggage. You can go for 4 months, stay super cheap and sleep on the roof of a youth hostel. That's not for everybody. And the same amount of money, you can go for a long weekend and stay in a 5-star hotel. That's for different people. And they should travel the way that they feel good about. I think that the biggest thing from an environmental perspective, that the single biggest thing you can do, and that also happens to be the easiest, if you're like, I would really love to go someplace warm. And let's say I'm in Sweden right now. So I could go, Greece is warm. I could go there. That's 4.5 hours away by flight. Or Portugal's warm or whatever. That's 4.5 hours. Or I could go to Mauritius. That's 2 to 3 times further away.
Right.
If I go to a destination that's warm and sunny, if that's what I want, and just go to some place that's the closer of my choices, that's the biggest environmental benefit. If I just kind of go, Mauritius sounds cool, I'd love to put that on Instagram. Right. Yeah, that's going to cost a lot for the environment. It's a big carbon emissions uptick if you do that. Right. So just picking something of your choices that you're looking for, picking a closer thing is probably the most important thing you can do. That's easiest, and it doesn't tell you not to travel. It's just pick something a little closer to home. It'll probably make it a better trip. You'll have more time in the destination, less time in transit, and better for the environment. I'd say it's more like that. Otherwise, and not just go, I like to tell people to do the things they like to do while they're traveling. So if you like to go bowling, go find a local bowling league. If you like to play ultimate frisbee, email the local ultimate frisbee club, see if you can join for practice. Like, use your interests. Golf is a classic one because you can just join a foursome or join a threesome, I guess it would be. I mean, that sounds worse, but yeah, you can join a group of other golfers and meet people as you golf, doing something you're passionate about with other people who are passionate about it. And making that human connection is the single coolest thing you can do while you're traveling. Yeah. And find different ways to let your interest be the skeleton key to open and unlock doors in different cultures. That's, I think, the number one tip I can give.
That is what I've done. I study history of puppetry, as I mentioned. So when I arrive in a city, I already know where the puppet theaters are, who's doing what. And if I go to there and talk to them, suddenly I'm in the culture. There you go. And whenever you meet someone, I mean, I also like seeing World War II sites and things like that. If you connect with people, then the trip becomes really meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think that is the point of travel, is to connect with that place you're going to. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. I think that's it. That's it in a nutshell from a consumer perspective for travel. And that doesn't matter if there's crowds or not. Right. You can find your way to your unique things and have your own great trip, great adventure. Come back with some new friends. That's the best souvenir you can return with, is the people in your contact list you made a nice connection with.
Right. Well, Doug, thank you for talking with me. And you should come to Tbilisi sometime. It's an interesting place.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I haven't actually ever been there.
Yeah. I'm sure if you decide to come here, I know some people who are connected, shall we say, and might find a way to get you to talk to the tourist people here.
Yeah.
But
happy to.
Anyway, thanks for all the videos you put out. I've been thinking about these things for a long time.
There's more to come. I hope you stay tuned. There's more stuff coming.
Oh yeah, well, don't worry. I'm subscribed, and I would recommend anyone watching this, if you've enjoyed hearing Doug talk, go check out his channel, Doug Lansky, link below. And so, thank you, and I hope we talk again sometime as the occasion arises.
We can connect further down the road. It's a pleasure. Have a wonderful day and a great week.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to thank Doug for taking from his schedule to spend time with us. And do go over and check out his tourism links, both his channel and his website. And if you are in the tourist industry and you work in a certain place, you might think about hiring him to come talk to the people who in your city or town or place that run your tourism department. He's an interesting person and can do some interesting analysis. And that does leave us a question. How do we go into the world and think about it? Well, I did do a video, 25 different tourists. I ranked them from the worst, we don't even want to talk about them, to the best. And you can go watch that video next. It's a good place to go to start thinking some more about tourism. Before I go, I just want to remind you that, hey, I need support here. I don't get paid for these videos. I make them. I've been doing this for over 5 years. People have been very generous at moments, but in terms of actual monthly salary, I make almost nothing. And I do need to make more because, life, inflation, all of that stuff. So if you feel like giving, go down below and give us a PayPal link or GoFundMe. There's these links below. You can do that. So from Tbilisi, Georgia, this is Burns saying, Drobit, temporarily. We will meet again. Nachwamdis.